what are some of the most weirdest requests that you've had?
I think Danny Boyle, for whom we did several films, he came to us one day and he was coordinating all the creative activity for the 2012 London Olympics, and he said, "I want to drop the Queen and James Bond into the opening ceremony." And anyway, this went on for a few months, and eventually the Queen was consulted and thinking, well, I don't know, she's not going to agree to that, is she? But she did. And I always remember going to Buckingham Palace to talk about how it was all going to work and happen. And the thing that amused me most was, having gone through the whole thing, it was all chaired by the equerry, the Queen's equerry. And he stood up and he just said, "Well, I must say, I've never had a meeting quite like this before." I thought, result.
That's mad. Do you know what? And I remember that opening. I think that's the best opening ceremony I've ever seen. For the
Well, it was the
Olympics.
biggest viewing figures we ever had. I think it was over 1 billion, and it was live. But of course, we spent the entire summer doing all sorts of projects for Danny Boyle in order to get the sequence right, because it was all cut in with live sequences of the day, but from previous recorded footage, because you have to go down the Thames and through Tower Bridge, and have to be opened and all that sort of stuff. And so we had everything to cut in, but the live stuff was done for real with the Queen and James Bond, who obviously were different people, jumping out at the same. But it had to be right to the second correct at the time, and all the rest of it
Wow. And
for the worldwide audience.
you must have had to keep this a secret as well.
I had to keep it a secret. I thought the amazing thing was, when it finally got signed, I went back and I said to Susie, "We just signed the most amazing contract. I'm afraid I really can't do anything about it, but it's really, really good." And she said, "Don't be ridiculous. I've already talked to Mark about that." And I thought, my God, Susie knows, but she never told anybody.
Well, I mean, you know what they say: behind every great man's a great woman, and your wife is one of the greatest women.
You're very
And
kind.
I mean, this is lovely because I mean, I've grown up knowing you and Pollyanna and Archie, and we've all grown up on this tiny little island of Alderney.
Yes.
Have you done any sort of ballooning over here? Did you ever bring your profession over
I
here?
did bring a balloon over here, and I flew it back to England from here. No hot air balloon has ever taken off from Alderney in history, as far as I know, and never has since. It was in 1994 in Alderney Week from the Buttes.
Mad.
Mad. And I thought it was great because we got Ray Parkin was in charge at the time, and he kept saying, "Right, you've got to be doing Cavalcade Day on the Monday." I said, "The weather isn't always quite like that. I've got to have a wind that goes somewhere towards Britain, which is like a sort of fairly big arc, at the right speed. I've got to be able to get it off. The weather's got to be okay and all this." But then on the Wednesday, I got my Met forecast seemed okay. And what's more, I reckon that if I went to 10,000 feet, I could just about fly home, which is near Winchester. But anyway, we got the balloon off, and all the island turned out, as there's a chapter about it in the book too. And I landed 5.5 hours later, unfortunately in Blandford Forum, but that's because Channel Islands Control wouldn't let me go above 2,000 feet until I was halfway across the channel, and all the winds were blowing the wrong way there.
Interesting. The planning of like a journey in a balloon. I can you just try and explain to me, because you don't have the ability to steer, is that right?
Correct, but you do, but you can, but the winds blow at different directions at different levels, and on the whole, you have what's called an adiabatic lapse rate, where for every 1,000 feet you go up, you lose temperature so much, and the wind veers in the northern hemisphere. And on the whole, the higher you go, the further right you will go compared to a ground wind. So you get used to all these things.
So is it kind of like do you go in like a circle kind of?
Geostrophic is what the word you're looking for.
Geostrophic. Damn it, Colin! I knew that was the word I was looking for. I was about to say a bend, or like a dog leg, or like
Yeah.
a sea. I don't know, but that's how you're picking your landing spots.
Yes, so that's where you pick your direction of travel. Yes, yeah.
How do you land a hot air balloon?
Quite often chaotically, depending on the speed of wind. and the shelter you manage to get, and whether you can park it behind a load of trees, that helps, for instance, because the wind drops right
Drop
down
straight away.
for landing. You can drag quite a long way in a basket. Um, Quite often I've dragged anything up to 100, 200 meters before I managed to get it to stop.
Oh God. Wow. And any injuries before?
I've never had any bad injuries ballooning, no. So,
That is unbelievable.
I mean, I've had a few bruises, and I've got a few things in my leg which I think, are rather like fiber, the big lumps, and you sort of think, oh God, what are these? I better get them checked out. They just said, no, that's okay. That's consistent with sort of, landing on it and that kind of stuff. So
Wow.
you get little minor injuries, but nothing serious.
Is there a is there a procedure to like landing in someone's garden? Because I feel like a lot of the
Well, you're
time.
entitled to land anywhere.
Really?
Yes, it's advisable to land somewhere sensible. Um, I spent my life trying to avoid um, crops and anything like that, and to land somewhere sensible. And then always find whoever owns the land to be able to clear it away, give them a bottle of wine or something, and usually everybody's happy.
Wow. That is a very I guess a weird way of thinking about it today when everything's about like ownership and or you can't do this without permissions and stuff. But it sounds like back then it was a bit more accepted that.
Well, it's legal as well because obviously because you can't steer balloons. They're called aerostats for a reason. They're static. They just go with the wind.
Mm.